At this point you should have your 3 strips for your 9-patch block laid out like this. It's important to, after you sew them together, that you iron your seam allowances towards the dark fabric. That means that on your middle strip your seam allowances are going to go inward, and on your outer strips your seam allowance for the middle block is going to go out. This is for 2 reasons. You always want to iron them towards the dark fabric so that the seam allowance doesn't show through the light fabric, but it's also so that when you put your blocks on top of each other, the seam allowances will stagger. You'll see how they butt together like that, the 2 little blue folds. That'll give you a nice sharp point on your block. So you want to pin that corner. Then we'll want to go over here to this corner. See how our seam allowances are butting together right there? We'll want to pin right there to keep that a nice sharp point. Then we'll go over here to the left side and pin, making sure that our pin goes in on this seam allowance and comes out on that seam line, I mean. And I like to pin one last pin in the middle of the center block. Now we're ready to sew. We're going to sew from right to left, just like we did before. Get our threaded needle, come up from behind at the corner, through the front. Sometimes you may have to get a little finagly with that to get it in. Now, just like we did before, you'll lay your needle down and take several stitches at a time, trying to keep your stitches even. Every so often you may want to take a little back stitch just to make sure everything stays secure. Oops, just got off my line. Sometimes, depending on the color of your fabric, it can be hard to see your seam line. If that happens, you just pull your threads out and start over. Keep going until we hit a pin, and I'll show you what you do when we get to a pin. Okay, I'm getting close to my pin now. So I want to hold my fabric. I want to try to keep that seam allowance free if I can. So I go through this part into the corner and out on the corner here, then I take my pin away. Then I go through the seam allowance and come out on this side, and I do the same thing over here. I go down on this line and come out over here. That way I've left my seam allowance free. And I just do the same thing all the way across. As I come to the pin in the middle, I'll just throw it out. Take a little back stitch, or just stitch in the same place, and I just continue. I want to show you the pin, the corner technique one more time. And here we're coming to another seam. So I'm careful to make sure I lift this up and out of the way. Take a few more stitches. And get one more little stitch in. Come up in the corner. Take my pin away. Go through just this seam allowance and come out on the other side. Now I'll go down on my seam line, moving that seam over in the back. Sorry, I'm not holding it. Then we just continue all the way off the edge. Whoops, we're shredding a little bit. Don't worry if you shred. When your stitches are small, that'll keep it from coming apart past your seam line. So now we just finish all the way across the edge. Like this, getting rid of pins as you come to them, taking a back stitch every now and then, and when you get to the end, just like before, you do a little knot. And that's it. And you cut the thread, and we'll open it up so you can see it. Now you'll do the same thing with this side. I'm not going to sew it right now, but I'll fold this over so you can see. And you would pin it just like you did before and sew across that seam. And when you open it up, you'll have your 9 patch block.